Hey everybody, welcome to the Osint Curious Webcast podcast. Yet another great webcast episode with a special guest. But before we go into our guest, we want to introduce ourselves with the guest's name. So I'll introduce myself first. My name is Nico Dekens, also known as the Dutch Osint guy, and I'm handing over to John. Please introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm John Turbush, Gumshoe on Twitter. Let's go to Nix.
Hi everyone, it's Nixintel. I'm Nixintel on Twitter. It's great to be back after a long break, and I'm going to hand over to Lorand.
Hi everyone, here is Lorand. I'm also glad to be back again. And you can also find me on Twitter. My handle is Lorand Bodo. I will hand over to Kirby.
Hello everyone, my name is Kirby Plessas. My Twitter handle is Curbster, and I'm going to hand it to Rae.
Hey everybody, my name is Rae, and you can find me on Twitter under Wondersmith_Rae, and I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Then it's my duty to welcome our special guest in today's episode. So welcome Emmanuelle Welch. Emmanuelle is a licensed private investigator, certified fraud examiner, and also owner of French Connection Research, which is a private investigative agency in Brooklyn, New York. And she specializes in white-collar crime investigations, cross-Atlantic litigation support, and also OSINT analysis. And she also integrates dating and hookup apps into all types of investigations and maintains a directory that you may have come across in the past. So we will also drop the link later in the chat. You can find it, it's a start.me page. And Emmanuelle is also a co-author of The Art of Investigations, a really interesting book, and maybe she can talk a little bit about it as well. And she also currently serves as the Vice President of New York Society for Professional Investigators, SPI. So without further ado, welcome Emmanuelle, and thank you so much for being on this show today.
Oh, thank you, Laurent. Yeah. No, I'm very pleased to be with you and very honored because such a great group, international, and this year we can't really meet in person at conferences, so it's the next best thing, at least on Zoom, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe I can begin by asking the first question. So can you tell us a little bit about your story? So how did you end up in OSINT?
Yeah, it's always interesting, our backgrounds in OSINT, because we do different cases and we work differently if we work for the government, or in my case, I work mostly with attorneys and private customers, like clients who are corporations, or maybe they have private matters they need to deal with. So it's very different, especially when you work with attorneys, because there's so many things in the state of New York, at least, that you can't really do, you're not allowed to do. We don't have the same freedom as you do in the government, or so it's always fun to meet at conferences and compare what we can do, cannot do, the tools we use, cannot use sometimes. So my background is in journalism. So I don't have a law enforcement background. I was a reporter in Eastern Europe first, so in Hungary for a few years. And then I moved to the US and started covering Silicon Valley back in the fun days of, the early years of the web, and when people started adopting the web, and when it started changing our lives. And so this was really a lot of fun. And then I was a news reporter, and sometimes around 2004, I started transitioning into private investigations. I took a course to learn on public records. And because I was coming from France, working in the US, and I discovered that there were so many amazing public records that I could access if I only knew how to. And it's something, we don't have this luxury in old Europe. We don't have that many documents that are public records, government documents. So there are some, and actually it's funny because in Europe, more and more documents become public records, while here in the US, it seems like it's getting harder to access documents, even as a licensed private investigator. And that's when I started learning about OSINT. Back then, it wasn't called that. I think it was called Internet Research, as simple as that. And I think it was when Cynthia Etherington came to Los Angeles to speak to one of our professional organizations I belong to, because I've always been a believer in joining organization and talking to my peers and exchanging. And so she was a speaker, and she blew my mind, presenting on internet searches and Google hacks already. It was maybe 2004, 2005, and I was really impressed. And I loved her. I was like, wow, this woman is amazing, and she has a background as a librarian, so I could relate to her way to look at investigations. And she was the first. I think she's an Osint pioneer, and she was the first to really organize trainings. And I started going to all of her trainings across the U.S.
I have sort of a follow-up question for you, which you touched on there. You talk about the difficulties to some extent of finding information on people in the EU as far as public records. I know as a fellow PI, having worked my fair share of international cases, getting information on an American citizen is typically much easier than someone, say, in the EU. Are there sort of some go-to OSINT places that you really like to touch on when you're doing that sort of work?
In the EU, from the US?
Yeah.
For international due diligence, for corporate due diligence or cases like that?
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, so funny, I just attended a webinar by Cynthia about that, about international due diligence, and 2 days ago. And she was talking about how the Library of Congress has a lot of resources, which I should email to you if you want to put in your notes, where you can see the legal resources available for each country. So all the courts that have websites and what is available on those websites. Because in France, not a lot of court records are available, but sometimes they are. And a lot of records are available through what they call Le Journal Officiel, the official gazette of the government. Like if people apply for building permits, or it appears in these gazettes. So if you know where to look, they're pretty searchable. There's not one to go to, but the general rule is that, yes, start in the US with Library of Congress and pages on Wikipedia that have done the job for you, that have already researched what is available in China, what is available in Dubai, what is available in different countries and states and cities. And also, I would say a lot of the research is media. Look at newspapers, local newspapers, look at gazettes in cities. It depends on what you're looking for, but a lot of it, you have to rely on media searches outside of the US much more, because government documents are not readily available.
Yeah.
Even if you have someone on the ground, if you have a gumshoe on the ground,
right.
You can.
And even that brings me to another one, which is working these international cases, and you obviously are from Europe, so you have some background there, but I often found as an investigator that it worked best to have someone in that local area, whether it was Europe or some other international place. What are your thoughts on bringing in someone locally that's familiar with that culture or the records there when you're doing an international investigation?
Well, I find that it's always good to start as an OSINT professional, to start yourself, because you may find more than the local gumshoe on the ground, because of the fact that you can search within a tiny local gazette that he wouldn't think of, because he's on the ground and he knocks on doors. At the same time, you may need the local person to do a pretext call to help with directing your research. So I would say always give yourself maybe 2 or 3 hours of online search, because you may be able to pull out quite a bit. So, and it depends on the country. If you don't speak the language, if you have to do a case in Hungary and you pull out Hungarian websites, just go straight to the PI probably. If you work on a case and you know a little bit the language, if you know some Spanish or some French, or in the UK, you can already get started and find quite a lot of things. It depends on the countries. in general, I find that in Europe, you find a lot of corporate information public, because a lot of companies have to publish their financial results, their financial yearly reports. Here in the US, it's like one sheet that means nothing. They just say, yeah, we filed a report to say we still exist. But in France, it's amazing. It's not all Osint in the sense that you need to pay maybe €8 or €10, but you get the report and you find the founder of the company has to disclose their full name, their date of birth, where they were born, if they're married, to whom, and their home address. So you get a lot of information from company records. And in France, a lot of people buy real estate through a company. And so even if the person you're targeting doesn't have a corporation, is just maybe is actually a CEO of a company you're trying to investigate. He may have invested and bought his apartment in Paris through a real estate company, and then you can find who he's married to, where he lives, and some, how much his apartment costs. It gives you some intelligence on him.
Yeah. Can I ask a question in addition to that? Because I'm not that familiar with PIs, but I do know that PIs have sometimes access to more closed databases because they have a PI license, right? How much of the information on average in your cases comes from those closed sources, and how many is open source intelligence?
It's what you say is, it's very true, and I find myself relying more and more on those PI databases to find emails and phone numbers, cell phone numbers of people, which are the what you need to start with when you look for someone. So it's not because necessarily I'm lazy, it's because all these Osint searches are taking much longer, especially social media searches. You need to, you can't do a straight Facebook search because your target has closed their Facebook. You need to go like 3 degrees deep into sometimes their first cousin to find some photos or some. So because I don't have the time, I buy, the search for an email address or a cell phone number, and it really jumpstarts the Osint search much quicker. So it's true, in the US we do that. In France, you can't really do, because people have their cell phones sometimes leaked on the internet. There are hacks like everywhere else, and sometimes you find people's phone number, the French cell phone or British cell phone. By the way, for international cell phone numbers, PIPL is really the best for me. I was looking for targets in Morocco, and I needed to find witnesses and to have the lawyers be able to contact the witnesses. They all had a Facebook account or Twitter that they had started with their cell phone, because in Africa, they use their cell much more than their email. The cell number is everything. And that's how we had cell phone numbers for all these witnesses. So PIPL, which has disappointed me lately in the US, is still, for me, really great for international cell phones. Now it's a pay database. It used to be Osint. Now you need to pay, but I subscribe to the API, which is much cheaper. So it costs me 40 cents a search, and you can do that. You just ask for it. If you can't afford the $200 or whatever they ask for individual subscriptions a month or something. So the API is, sometimes you can really subscribe to the API for all these services, and it's cheaper. The results are a bit, you just need to sort through, make it pretty. And,
it's JSON, right?
Yeah, it's JSON, but that's fine. You find the phone number or whatever username you need.
As long as you get what you're looking for.
Yeah.
I would second that too, Nico. I always started with that database search if I had, my access as a PI, because that gives you a great launching point. You have some really reliable data. Sorry, go ahead, Lorand.
Yeah, so just a general question because maybe some of our viewers might be interested in this, and also those who listen to it. For someone who's new to Osint and wants to get started, because we always get these questions like, how can you find a job? What can you recommend? If someone is interested in working in this kind of fields as you are doing, what would your advice be, and like how to get started? And also maybe you can describe your day-to-day job, how this looks like as an Osint when you use Osint and how you use it in your daily job?
The thing is that companies, they don't, if you look at job sites, they don't really use the word Osint too much. And the ones, it's usually banks or financial institutions who put the word Osint, and they're looking for people who are a bit technical usually, who can write scripts and who can, I would say Osint is useful for anything. So it's like a good skill to develop in general, just to find your way around life a bit more easily. I would say if you're young and organized and you like learning, softwares, and maybe try to master some tools that I don't master at all, but I find very interesting, like Maltego or Speier, even though it's controversial, perhaps with the Russian thing. I don't know. I use it. I love it. Maltego, all these link analysis tools. Companies are looking for people who master those tools. And if you use one, I would say you know them better than I do. But if you know one, you kind of understand how they all work, right? Would you say that?
Yeah, I would agree. Link analysis is link analysis. Doesn't matter what suite you have, it's just link analysis.
Okay. So if a corporation or big firm, like, in New York, you have all these large investigative firms that are technically consultancies. They're looking for people who know how to use a very expensive software that I never learned to use because I'll never be able to afford them. But so if you know that you're limber and you know how to, I think you have a great advantage, I would say. What do you think? You're maybe more plugged in the corporate world than I am.
I like to agree that a lot of companies are looking for that, but my main worry is when companies looking for that, they forget that a lot of those people forget how to do it manually. So if the tool breaks or it's not broken, they are blindsided. They cannot do anything anymore. Okay. So that's the big fall pit, or at least in my opinion, when you are relying on those tools. Not saying those tools are very powerful and useful for sifting through large amounts of data quickly, but for sure.
That's the conversation we love to have with older investigators. Like, at least we can do it manually. If the internet shuts down, we know how to find stuff. And but it's and I was talking about it with my friend Brian Willingham. He's younger than me, but we've talked about the fact that we feel very lucky that we knew how to navigate the world before the web. And not only you can find paper records, but also your mind is also less reliant on technology in a way. I hope so. But it's very true. How can you tell a 25-year-old you need to adapt, you need to have those skills that older folks have? How do you unlearn, or this I don't know actually. It's very interesting.
I think it's being Osint curious, right? It's just being curious and clicking on stuff and see what happens when you click here and there, and what new information can be yielded by clicking certain parts of the internet.
But it's great. I think we complement each other, older people and millennials. I think it's that's why it's great to work in teams. I love it when it happens.
Can I jump in with a question, kind of reach back question that was asked in the Q&A? The question is, are you aware of any free ways to find full UK mobile numbers? Landlines can be quite easy, but UK mobile seem to be really hard unless it's in the Whois or just posted online.
A free resource that's not people before it became a paid site. I would say it would be, nothing is totally free, but same thing. I would look into dehashed for leaks to see if you have the person's email address or name, or try to see if the cell phone number pops up and again, can you do that? Some attorneys would tell you, I don't want you to look into any of that, these data breaches.
What about things like Truecaller? Do you guys ever use anything like that, or caller IDs?
Yeah, you're right. Truecaller, and sometimes you get more from the mobile apps with those. You can Truecaller sometimes, but outside of the US, have you had good luck?
Yes, I actually have. I've had really good luck. Israel.
Oh, okay.
And I had a lot of luck with a tool called Sync.me, especially for Europe, especially when you have the paid pricing plan, which is about, I think, $20 a year.
I think some of these tools just are, they have more data for certain countries and that sort of thing, which sort of brings us back, Nico, to what you were saying about, the tools change and you need to know manually how to do things and understand that investigative process.
Yeah, like Lampire looks for VK accounts. So unless, you do a case involving Russia or neighboring countries, and they look for BlaBlaCars accounts, which is a European, and in France it exists, it's a sort of carpooling site. They look for things that in the US, your targets won't have or Aeroflot accounts, not everyone has a Aeroflot account. So tools have their specialties. I'm a bit low on Asian tools. This morning I quickly spent some time, even though it's postponed, but re-downloading WeChat, and because I have some new burner phones and WeChat and TikTok, and I was like, wow, they make it more difficult. So it's funny because before in Osint, one of the credo was like, it's important to use virtual machines and to erase things and start new accounts and all the time. And it's become really practically impossible not to recycle. You can't create a new account for everything because every new account is such a hassle to build, and you need a following and the followers, and new Facebooks get flagged. Your old Facebook goes through, and so you don't delete your old Facebook anymore because it's like gold now. This has changed, and now I'm a bit worried. So I just changed burner phones. That's why I re-download some apps. And was it WeChat? Yeah, WeChat. You have to be, you have to have another WeChat user scan your code and approve you. And the other WeChat user has to be a user for more than 6 months, or it's not instant anymore. And WeChat for me has been so helpful in Asian investigations or investigations of Chinese Americans in the US. I really need it. So I was like, wow.
So can I ask one question? Because you say you're noticing that basically the landscape is kind of shifting and changing, which makes it harder and difficult for us people to find stuff which we 5 or 2 years ago could more easily find because our accounts get deleted, new terms of services are in place. I know you have a great repository out there on start.me about those dating apps. Recently, I had a hard time accessing your repository because it was behind a wall. But can you tell me a little bit more? Because I always found those dating apps really interesting for investigative purposes. Why you made it and how do you use those? And do you see different change in the landscape there also?
Oh, yeah. And first of all, I'm sorry, and thank you for mentioning it to me that the link was suddenly behind some walls, so I had to... They had changed their terms of service, and so I put it's back to public, and it's on my Twitter bio if you're interested. At French PI. French PI is my Twitter handle. Dating apps I think are still not used as much as they could be in Osint investigations because I find them very, very helpful for a lot of cases. And they're not marital cases. They are cases where you need to locate someone or confirm maybe if they are who they are, where they live. People lie a lot on dating apps, but they also reveal a lot. And for location, it's pretty good. For example, not long ago, I was working on it's actually a case I worked on last year, and the attorneys couldn't find one of the co-defendants to serve him with some papers because of COVID. He had moved out of his dorm. He was a student. And so someone pretexted the dad who said he may be with one of his sisters, but I don't know which one, because it was some half sisters. And at least we had some indication. So we looked at the family tree, all the sisters, and then I looked on Tinder, and then I found him within a mile of that sister's address in Pennsylvania. And so we knew where he was staying. It was at 8 in the morning. He was probably in bed still or having his breakfast. So we knew where he was, and we knew where to send the process server. So that's very helpful. And it's very helpful when, you know, your subject is in Pennsylvania and not in New York City. But dating apps I find, amazingly useful, and they're a bit unexplored. They're not. A few years ago, I gave a presentation at Osmosis, and I told everyone, enjoy while it lasts, because it's not going to last. And actually, we're still enjoying the ride. A few apps have made it more difficult to create dummy accounts. Like you need to have a video selfie. But I work around it by either I open an account under my name, or with me, and I try to stay as close to the truth as possible. So I use maybe my middle name, and I use photos from me a long time ago, but a mix of photos that are a bit Instagrammed, you know. So it's, at the end, I try to be as honest as possible. And if I need an account with a male person as friends, or my brother said, okay, take these photos if you want. So you find a way to do it in sort of legally, or not violating the terms of service, and it's amazing how you can still do that quite a bit. So yeah, locate people, find where they work and where they hang out. We had a lady, we were not sure where she was living, and her dating profile, which I found, said that she works at the library and she has lunch every day at the park. And if people want to meet her, they can meet her at the park every day. So it was an indication that, yeah, she lives in that city, and we know where to find her if we need to start a surveillance. Or there was a guy on Grindr who even an Egyptian guy in the US who even told on Grindr, well, I'm going to Alexandria for 3 weeks and I'll be back on. He gave the time, and so you could almost pick him up at the airport if you needed to do surveillance. So it was really, and there was a runaway teenager. We didn't know where he was, and I found him on Grindr as well, and then he disappeared. And I could see on Grindr that he was 12 kilometers away for the next, for the following 4 hours. I was like, why is he 12 kilometers away for the next 4 hours? Where is it? And then I looked at a map, and there was JFK Airport, and I was like, maybe he's on his way somewhere. He's at the airport waiting for a plane. And so it's not an absolute source of absolute information, but it gives you indication. And then the mom said, oh yeah, he's going to Africa to volunteer. I was like, okay, so he's going to Africa, but then the dad didn't know. Some complicated story, but it's really another source of intelligence that is not very difficult to investigate, and it gives you some interesting information.
Yeah, really interesting insights here. Really enjoying your answers. Looking at the time, we need to slowly shift towards the news, but there's one question we always ask each and every guest we have on. What is something within the ocean field you have always wanted to learn and never come to until now?
It's really Python. I started taking the course with Just Inside, and I start, and then I follow I need to go back on, and so I wish I had several hours, a week to do that. I need to find them, but with COVID, it's not really. Everybody has a different experience with COVID. Some people have all this free time suddenly. Some others have like various children under their roof that they need to occupy and keep busy. Yeah, Python. I think it would be very useful. And another thing, and actually Micah's post on Osint was very useful, is developers' tools. I want to learn more because I find a lot of things when you lift the hood, and you find a lot of info.
Exactly. I like that metaphor, lifting the hood. Yeah, really cool.
Yeah. It's helping a lot, like for me lately. So like if you could do another video with Mika or someone else about more developer tools, hacks and tricks, I would be grateful.
Well, noted. Maybe we're doing some blogs or 10-minute tips. I wanted to thank you a lot for this time in this interview. Let me show everybody where they can find you before we go into the news. So Emmanuelle also has a website which you can find at frenchdetective.com. You can take a look at it there, and you can, of course, find her at her Twitter account, being the French PI. Well, you may have noticed a little bit by her accent that she's kind of French. So French PI, we all come up with those really good names, right? When you're Dutch, you do some Dutch in your name, and you're French, you do some French in your handle. So where are my US guys? No, kidding. Emmanuelle, thank you so much. Please stick around as we move into the news and chime in where you want to chime in. Moving from the interview to the news now. Let me talk about first a new sponsor. We've got a new great sponsor, being awareonline.com. They sponsored us, so thank you for that. Appreciate that. And if there are other listeners out there who want to sponsor us, take a look at our domain, and we can tell you how you can contribute, either via Patreon or just doing a more company-wise sponsoring. That being said, we also had our second official guest blog. This one was done by Amin G. Maybe Lorand, I think you know him best. Want to chip in a little bit on here?
Yeah, so this is, so Amin, I think he will be also at some point on our webcast, so he can maybe then also talk more about his work. But in this blog post, he kind of like wrote an introduction into how to research entities in the US, and he kind of like provides really useful resources on how to obtain publicly available information. Here, for instance, such as the FARA.gov or justice.gov website, and kind of like gives also tips and shows some tricks on how to obtain kind of like not secret, but relevant information. And it's a really nice introduction into this whole topic of researching foreign influence in the US.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this article. There were still some gents that I didn't know of, or at least how to leverage the important information from it. I knew about the resources, but now I learned a trick or two. That's why I like Osint so much. Every day you learn.
Exactly.
Anything else on this article? No? Okay, let me move into Teferugugli. I hope I pronounced it right, but it was a new tool that Sawdust, and Sawdust is for the people who are in the Osint field, are maybe familiar with, because he already helped us with building that awesome tool that helps you to do those Facebook graph-like searches. Once the original Facebook graph search died a few years ago, he came up with how to manipulate those JSON code type of URL strings. He now released a new tool, Teferugli, and basically it's meant to be a Twitter analysis suite. I have not had the time to install it and do it. I've read some people who also had some trouble installing it, but everything you need in there, keep in mind, it's for free, open on GitHub. So it's probably a first release, so it may be a little bit wonky in the beginning, but Sawdust, knowing Sawdust, it's something that's going to be good, and it's actively being worked on, so we can expect some new updates probably in the near future. Definitely something to check out, worth checking out. Next article.
I think I was going to.
Who wants to chip in? Yeah.
So this is an article. In fact, it's a series of 3 articles from Sim Windy, who we featured quite a bit of his stuff on here before. But it's a guide to sort of Osint methodology and how to conduct research. It's not about tools as such. It's more about how you think. So The first part of this article, the intelligence cycle, looks at planning and direction, how you decide what you're actually going to do. Sim Windy is here in chat, I'm told. Hi, Sim Windy. This is a great article. The second part looks at gathering information, and then the third and final part, which is just published, looks at how you analyze it and turn it into a useful product. I think for anyone who is interested in doing their own OSINT investigations or is looking at how to develop their skills on the theoretical side, it's a really good and accessible read. It's really, really a good piece of work.
Yeah, I totally agree. It was a good read. I really enjoyed reading this one. Yeah, definitely. So again, thank you, Sin Windy, for yet another great gem for the OSINT community. Moving to my good online digital friend, Francesco Pauli, our Italian guy. Some people may know him because he contributes a lot to Twint. He now recently released a small script because he also has this great Telegram search engine, which probably a lot of us have used or know of. And now he transformed that into a Maltego transform. I tested this. It works perfectly fine. So if you are familiar with Maltego and now know how to install a transform, you can install this and use this to search for Telegram channels and channel names that are publicly available, or at least can be found publicly. This is a great way to pivot into different channels. Really cool tool. Next up, this was from you, Nix, or Lorand?
Me.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I came across this really interesting article, and it's just a quick kind of like story about how you can, it's a nice case study of how you can use Companies House streaming API to find newsworthy stories. So this is was nicely written and explains how you can go about using a tool. So this one uses R, so it's not in Python, but R. Also very famous, and a lot of academics use it. And it just walks you through on how you can use such data that is publicly available and find stories in there. So it's kind of like more data journalism, but it doesn't really matter if it's journalism or not. The underlying methodology can be applied to literally anything. And we also talked about kind of like different cases. Emmanuelle was talking about how to find information, and Companies House is kind of like in the UK, gives you information about companies, who owns it, and a lot more information, correspondence address, etc., etc. So that's just a nice case study of how you can use R and extract information from there. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I agree. I think a lot of people tend to forget about R as a suite, which you can do some great analysis in, but it also has some great plugins / add-ons to pull information from APIs or other sources which you may want to use from an open source intelligence perspective. So for those who only stare themselves blindly on coding languages like Java or Python or whatever, you may want to take a look in R, because in my personal experience, R, its learning curve initially isn't as hard as, for instance, JavaScript or maybe even Python, because it's a pretty straight out of the box working tool. Mm-hmm. Don't know if there are any other opinions about R, or are there none?
I tried to learn it. It's hard.
It is. I learned it at uni.
I think it was Talk Like a Pirate Day. It would have been very, very topical then. R.
Yeah. R. Well, maybe we got a new case studying piracy on the seas that is still going on. How many R's there still are. No, all the bad joking aside, I ran into this article yesterday, which I really enjoyed. It's the subtle information hackers find in background of your social media photos. So that's the title of the article. But what I really enjoyed, it's basically an entire story by Casey Botticello. It was written somewhere back in January, but he tells you how hackers, but also investigators and online researchers can look at photos and yield really meaningful, detailed information from it. But it can also put your company, your personal, your private life at risk, because a lot of people are just not aware enough of what kind of information we can extract from these photos. License plates here, for instance, which can lead you to maybe the owners of the car, or at least make and model. You'll see offices where a lot of sensitive documents can be found and you can look at. So I still think that every now and then articles like this are so important for general awareness for the mass majority of computer users, maybe, or internet users. But also for me as an open source intelligence investigator, I read these articles and I see things. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, that's a possibility. It's been ages that I used that possibility, but now I got reminded about it again. So this is why I like articles like these. And again, for those listening, all the articles we mentioned will be dropped in the show notes later on for a webcast recording. But also, someone pinged me on Twitter about this article. No, it was on my LinkedIn saying, hey, there's also some ethical considerations while posting these kind of articles, because you can make bad actors wiser than they already are. They can learn so much from the techniques we teach them, basically. Also, for instance, on our Osint Curious blogs that others can learn from. So always a line. Yeah, you want to add something?
I had a question, Nico, because once I was looking for a fugitive who was hiding either in France or in Barcelona, Spain, and he was publishing on Facebook photos of his boarding passes. So he was hopping all over Europe when he was not supposed to travel freely. And I remember finding, so that you had the QR code, a sort of a code on the plane tickets, and they were a bit skewed. So I tried to work them on Photoshop or to make it square again. I was trying to scan the plane. Yeah. It failed. It didn't work. But is it something that would be possible to do?
Well, it's good you asked, because I was...
I was going to mention this. Yeah.
I was going to mention this article because this article got pointed. I found it because Benjamin Strick posted this on his Twitter timeline saying this is an amazing article. You got to read this. So I read it because when Ben says so, you do so. So here is the former Prime Minister of Australia showing his passport number, or finding his passport number through a boarding ticket. So on his Instagram, he posted a boarding ticket. The person who wrote this blog did some really extensive open source intelligence and used some great techniques. Also, as I was amazed by the state of mind he basically has or had during this investigation to come to a conclusion where he, in the end, by using the developer tools, which you just said I want to learn more about, he found his phone number, his private cell number in there. And he found, and correct me if I'm wrong here, people, a phone number and something else. Let me quickly...
Passport number was in there too.
Yeah, it's official passport numbers, yeah.
The airline shared that information. It didn't show it on the web page, but it was shared within the source code for the page.
The code, yeah, okay.
See here you'll see the document number and the phone number is being found in the code. So basically this answers your question, Emmanuelle. It can be done, but it is hard. It is hard. And yeah, will this happen often? Probably not.
If I'm correct. Okay. And that is that it was skewed, right? It wasn't straight, so it was hard to read.
That's the problem. It was skewed.
Yeah. I have that for you for that, though. Snapseed. You go to Snapseed, you go into the tools and the perspectives, and you can straighten out things that are skewed. And it doesn't work.
Thank you. Love it.
Yeah, the Snapseed app. Yeah. That's
and
a good one.
Blog, he actually had that same difficulty where he was not able to get the code to read, but he noticed that there was the code was actually written in regular ASCII, so he was just able to.
Okay, even better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, super awesome article. I really enjoyed reading this one. It will be also again be posted in our show notes. Moving to the next article, the EPS Google Account Finder. I think it was you, Nix, who posted this, right?
Yeah, that's right. So those of you who follow Sector 035's blog, he posted about a year ago, he'd done some digging into how Google puts its IDs together, how Google accounts are formed, and how you can work from a Google email address to YouTube accounts and things like that. And EPOS have taken the sector's research and they put it all together in an easy tool for you to use. So basically, this allows you to research any Gmail address. So you put a Gmail address in, it will tell you that person's... I refuse to believe there's no John Doe at gmail.com. You put someone's Gmail address in there, and it will tell you where the URL for their photo albums, if they have public photo albums. I think it has the URL for their YouTube as well, possibly. It has their Google profile picture, and it brings up this the last update. Sorry, I said YouTube profile. It brings up their Google Maps profile, so if they've added or edited any locations. And this last update, we think, refers to not when they actually last used the Gmail account, but when we think it's when they last accepted Google's latest privacy terms and conditions. So if you've got a Gmail address and you want to know if it's active, that will at least give you a rough idea. But yeah, Sector deserves a lot of credit for this because he did the hours and hours of research, and EPOS have turned it into a really useful tool. I've used it a few times this last week, actually. It's really good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed. I was amazed how many Gmail accounts have another Gmail account attached to it. So it's great for pivoting if you already know an email address.
And the Google Maps links to the reviews, right? So sometimes they review. Because I worked on an accident case this week, and there wasn't much except the lady reviewed. She killed a cyclist, but she had reviewed a LASIK surgery center a few months prior. So now the attorneys for the victim, for basically the people trying to find more information about this lady know that she had LASIK surgery, which is a piece of information that could be useful, or at least you know what she may come up with when.
Interesting.
So you have the reviews, and sometimes they review, local pizzerias or restaurants, and you see where they're active, where they work and live.
So maybe gyms, restaurants, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Next article is about the Global Investigative Journalism. They had some new podcast out. Was Lorand, you posting this one?
Yeah, exactly. So generally, it's a really cool website to follow. The newsletter is really good, and it has also sometimes really good tips and tricks for Osint, mostly tailored to journalists, but it doesn't really matter where you work. If you're into Osint, check it out. And this one, I thought, just give it a shout out because it lists like really interesting podcasts, and I love to listen to investigative podcasts where people talk about how they went about a case, how they solved stuff, because this is how I kind of like learn new things, but also see how people approach the same problem I have encountered numerous times and maybe learn something. So check it out if you're interested, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't like podcasts during COVID times because I used to listen to podcasts during commuting.
Yeah,
and we don't commute anymore.
I'm actually surprised there are a lot on here I have not seen or listened to.
Cool. Well, now you have at least 12 new ones.
Yeah, if it's true crime, I'm usually on top of it, but I haven't seen a lot of these.
Yeah, and there's so much out there. But I'm looking at it now. It looks like some really interesting ones. Yeah, definitely. There was a new open source intelligence conference that has opened its call for papers or presentations. Lorand?
Yeah.
You posted this one in?
I think that was me again. So, it's just a call for proposals. So whoever wants to kind of like give a presentation and talk about something, there you go. This is the form. You can pitch a presentation. And if you are successful, you can then speak at this conference. But for more information, just visit the website.
So it's presented by the Many Hats Club. Shout out to them, do awesome work. Trace Labs, shout out to them, do awesome work. And the NCPTF, of course. Well, all some really big players in the Osint landscape, right? So bound to be a good con, I hope. Maybe I'll do a CPF myself. You never know. Then we have the last entry for today for what news is all about. I think this was also you, Lorand, last one.
Yeah, exactly. So, as it says, it's a worldwide collection of industrial designs data. I haven't used it before, but apparently it is really, really useful. And it also contains another link, which is an article written by Matthias Wilson, MW Osint, and he talked about how you can use this database specifically in an Osint context. So I think he also provides a couple of cases and examples. So I will also put it in the show notes so you can go and check it out. But this is really cool, especially if you work in in various fields. Whenever you need to check something, do a Google reverse image search, maybe you find it, maybe you can't find it. So it's good to have kind of like a database backup. So
yeah, I like
it. This was really cool.
Yeah.
Because
especially for the child abuse.
Yeah, I was just going to say that would be really good for locating. They have what's the one where they do the rugs? Is it the repository of rug pictures from hotels?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because they are all unique, same like the curtains.
Yeah, so it'd be really cool to have. I don't think everybody has access to that though. I think you can upload pictures, but you can't see them. So this is actually cool that we have access to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so the WePo.in will also be in our show notes. I think it's a really cool repository. I really need to play around with that and especially figure out how to find information fast that I can really corroborate with, for instance, what I find in a picture, because that's probably the hardest part, but still the most useful part. Anything else for news? Because this is what I would have lined up for today. You all have entries in there? Nothing? Well, then we move into the shameless self-promotion part and saying goodbye, because we are almost in an hour. Well, I'll go myself first. I have nothing to shamelessly promote except go watch the Osint Curious blog, go watch the episode if you weren't tuning in live. And you can always follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, whatever you want to follow me, Dutch_Osint guy. And I'm handing it over to Nix.
Okay, so I've had a really quiet summer on the internet front, but I'll be back with some more content. Over the summer, I've recorded a series of 4 10-minute tips for the Osint Curious YouTube channel. The first ones of those are going to look at image geolocation, so which a lot of people have asked about how to get into. So start off with really simple things and gradually make them a bit harder. The first of those should be out on YouTube before the next webcast. No pressure on myself to get them before then. But yeah, they will be out soon, and I'll have some new blog content out too.
Super awesome. So Lorand, what's with you?
I mean, I'm super busy as usual, but I have nothing to promote. So
okay. Rae, and you?
I have a few talks, but they're college talks, so they're not open to everybody. But I did just participate in B-Sides Copenhagen, so that stream, I believe, is live now for everybody to watch, and they're going to break every presentation up, and that'll be up soon. So if you missed my talk, you can check it out.
Oh, cool. Yeah, really interesting. Kirby, how about you?
For me, Osmosis is coming up. So Osmosis Virtual is coming up in early October, something to look forward to. Other than that, you can always I have webinars available on academy.plessas.net.
Cool. John, how about you?
Not much for me, but I may have some classes with the SANS Institute Osint class coming up. Nothing firmly scheduled yet. I've been on a bit of hiatus with COVID and all that, but should have some of those coming up soonish.
Okay, cool. And lastly, but certainly not least, our guest of today. Anything you want to say to the audience or want to promote?
The Society of Professional Investigators. We're having a virtual meeting on Thursday that's open to all interested. It's on our website, spyonline.info. And our guest this week is Matt Speier, the private investigator in New York who's created the Investigators Toolbox. And I believe that Kirby is part of this new community of professional investigators. There's some training there. There's a forum. I haven't tried it yet. It just launched. So Matt is going to introduce the investigators toolbox on Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern time for anyone who wants to log in. Go to spyonline.info on Thursday, the 23rd, I believe. Anyway, on Thursday.
We'll make sure it's in our show notes.
Yeah. Exactly, and I will put it on my Twitter, so all are welcome, and there's a happy hour before if you want to drink and chat with investigators from the New York area.
Interesting. Sounds really interesting.
Thank you for having me, Rae.
Well, it was a pleasure and an honor. Learned a lot. That being said, we are in almost an hour. I want to thank you all for attending, and we're going to close up as a group by saying, stay Osint curious. Oh, I had to do it on my own. So disappointing, guys. Okay, see you next week. In 2 weeks, everybody. Thank you.
See you. Thank you.
See you. Thank you.
Bye.